So today we're here to talk about the language of leadership. And the distinction here is what we're talking about is how we coordinate and move things into action. So it has its own distinct and separate piece from social communication. So at times, if it sounds a little clunky, it's probably because we've been used to mixing the two and not pulling them apart. So with that, I'm going to share my screen and hopefully you're going to see. Okay, desktop, share, and hang on. And that didn't share, did it?
Yep.
Yeah, you see language of leadership, the title page?
Yep.
Excellent, excellent. All right. So that's me. I was a one-time executive overseeing about 300 employees. And then I took this new career of becoming an executive coach. I say that because I've been in the chairs you are trying to coordinate a lot of activities. So when we talk about the language of leadership, and here we go. We're talking about business communication here. And the primary purpose of a business conversation is to produce action, right? Social conversations do other things for us, right? They help us create bonds, relationships, and so forth. But when we're in a business, and I mean business, any endeavor that's trying to produce an outcome, we have a responsibility and accountability to produce action at the end of the day. So there's also a role in business to use communication to build relationships. So I'm not going to emphasize that today. I'm not going to say it's not important. It's just, we're going to spend about 50 minutes together. And so we're just going to set this aside for today, right? And so we're going to talk about how do we use language for action, language for action. So in business, we hear a lot of this, right? We hear a lot of complaint. And actually not just in business, right? It's hard not to walk down the street and overhear somebody complaining. Or sometimes, back when we used to walk through our front door from work as opposed to just leaving our desk for work, people would dump their stuff down and say, what a horrible day, right? So that's problematic because it's sapping energy, morale, it's also sapping time, right? So it sounds like this, it's hot out, right? It's cold out. We don't have enough snow this year, right? Or I don't like working with Mark, right? Complaining about Mark, right? But it doesn't tell us anything, right? Housekeeping isn't doing their job, right? Well, what is their job and what are they not doing, right? These are complaints. We can't take action from them. And then my favorite, if only, fill in the blank. If only we had more money. If only we could hire that one other person, right? So the if only conversations tend to kill or suspend action, right? And, the data can't be right. Well, I started my career as a financial analyst. And yeah, the data is usually right. It's not just annoying, right? It doesn't get us anywhere, right? So annoying in the sense where it can sap our morale, but also we'll just be stationary. It's like being on a stationary bike, right? While we're pedaling hard, nothing's happening for us. So here's some scary statistics, right? On average, people complain an hour each work week. They spend an hour their whole week complaining. That's really pitiful. And people complain 30 times a week. God, do we realize we do this? I didn't tally these all up for myself, but I found these studies. And I can imagine a time much earlier in my life when I probably did that, right? My boss this, right? Or, gosh, I used to live in Phoenix, right? So, God, it's hot out, right? So did that all the time there. And so we can get really absorbed with this, right? Such a waste, such a waste. And there's even, books about this, right? Culture of complaint, society of complaint. And we can live in this. So as a as we transition towards leadership for action, we can get this out of complaint. We can get it out of complaint. So there's hope here. There's hope, I promise. So we engage in communications for these fundamental reasons, right? We create common meaning and understanding. So do we all understand, and do we all have a same sense of why we're doing things and why we're cooperating with each other? We want to generate a better future. And that can be anything, right? A number of nonprofit organizations are here with us today. And so they're trying to make a betterment in the community, right? Helping the lives of people with disabilities, as an example, right? But it also could be to make money, right? There's nothing evil about that. That can create a better future. It can pay for kids' college and so forth, right? It can allow us to expand. We also use business communication to coach, educate, train, and so forth, right? That is, how do we get people capable of taking action? And then coordinated action, right? So action in of itself is not a useful thing, but it is useful when we coordinate effectively. And then we also initiate action with our language, we complete it, and then we also transition actions. So sometimes we forget that we're so focused on starting something that we also forget at the other end to complete it. Right? Well, now stop doing that, right? Or don't do it that way anymore. Here's our new way, right? And ultimately, if we are effective in this, we'll build trust. We'll build trust. So, like I said, this is language for action, right? For me, this is a very noble endeavor. So we're going to call it language for action, right? We do this all the time. Sometimes we're really effective with it, sometimes not. And today you're going to figure out, well, oh yeah, that's how I was successful, or over here, that's why it was a lot of energy, but the wheels were spinning. So I'm going to introduce a weird term to you, and that's speech acts, right? So this is coined by a really smart guy out of the UC Berkeley, who he de-engineered English language and tried to pull it apart and understand what are the pieces that actually produce action versus, you know, what's descriptive or what's storytelling and so forth. So speech act, what he says, is something that when we speak it, we produce action, right? The good news is, down at the very bare bones of it, there's only 6 of them. There's only 6 of them. Of course, there's, you know, a million variations of them, but only 6 things for us to pay attention. We can do this without having to have notes because the studies say we can remember 7 things all at once, right? That's why the phone company created 7-digit phone numbers. So you're going to be able to remember these and take these with you back to your workplace and back to home, right? So here's what they are, right? Here's the keys to the kingdom: an assertion, right? An assessment, a declaration, a request, and an offer. And then the 6th one is really a special one, and it's called a promise. And I'm going to set that aside, and we'll talk about that later, right? So oftentimes we want to get a promise out of somebody because we know if we do that, we'll get really strong coordinated action. So I'm going to say, yes, we're going to get to that, and we're going to do it by really getting effective with the others, and then we'll pull it together about how do we turn that into a promise. Okay, so we'll talk about all these. We'll talk, right? I'll talk about all these, and then you're in a position just to listen. Sorry, we don't have the interactive that we would in person, right? So an assertion, what on earth is that? It's something that's true and verifiable, right? So my car has 4 wheels, right? My house has a roof, right? We have, $642,000 in sales this year, right? These things could be true and verifiable. Assertions are really valuable because they can help create a common set of facts about either the past or the present. Assertions can never speak about the future, right? They don't. So not if it's true and verifiable, unless one of you got a time machine, in which case I want to borrow it, okay? So what we do is these help ground us together in our common reality, right? Sometimes if we don't have these in place, then our future action can be chaotic. But we'll also talk about how an assertion in of itself can produce action, okay? So here are some examples, right? What's the bank balance, right? How much money do we have at the end of the day, the end of the month, the end of the year? A financial statement, how's our money being spent, right? Number of hospital beds, right? That's an assertion. We can actually go through the hospital and count them all, right? How many employees you have, right? Or the grade of gravitational acceleration. Of course, many of us forgot physics, but I didn't. I loved it. But we'll talk about each one of these and how they might compel us into action, okay? So how an assertion generates action. If the bank balance is negative, I might be compelled to put money into it. Best Rome would hope that I put money into the bank and cover that negative bank balance. So that alone might compel me into action. Or it might compel me to tear through the financial statements and understand, how did we get to here, right? Number of hospital beds. If our hospital here, Mercy's, is chronically full, right, and even turning people away, that might prompt them to move into action to build a hospital expansion, right? Rate of gravitational acceleration. I might yell at my son, get down off the damn roof, right? Because I know how fast he's going to accelerate and he's going to break something, and then I'll be at the hospital and there's not enough hospital beds for him, and then we'll really be in trouble, right? Right, so that's an assertion, true and verifiable. Now, an assessment is something a bit different. They are interpretations, right? That is, we speak them from our own learnings, our experiences, our past, our expertise, right? And we're doing our best to make them accurate, but we can't say it's true and verifiable. So we have our own filters, right, as we generate what our assessments are. So my past might create a different assessment about an event than Jack's past might, right? My expertise in a certain area might create a different assessment than somebody else's expertise, right? A business major might be quicker to look at what's the bottom right number, right? And what are the assessments that produce that? Somebody perhaps with a social services or sciences background might be looking at other filters as they want to give and hear their assessments, okay? However, they're hugely valuable because if we can share and communicate perspectives effectively, people have a better understanding, and an assessment alone can produce action, right? They also help us frame a new future. If we can all have assessments about where we are, we might be able to get a grasp on where we're heading. So here are some examples, right? We have sufficient cash to weather the downturn in the economy, right? See, it's speaking about the present and also a bit speaking into the future, right? We're using our past experiences of having to weather downturns. We're making an analysis of what's happening and saying, yeah, our cash position is good. Mark is a great employee because he's a critical thinker, right? So saying Mark is a great employee is not a very good assessment, because I don't know what you mean by that, but by adding he's a good critical thinker, oh, okay, hadn't really thought of myself that way, but that's really helpful, right? The patient's health is improving, right? So that can produce action. And Ian is an expert climber, right? My son Ian's an expert climber, huh? Well, okay, so that's a powerful assessment. He might go climb more if he hears that, right? Or he might start a climbing company, right? See how those kinds of assessments can begin to move us into action. So here's how they generate action, right? So if there's sufficient cash, then we could decide, let's not lay off anybody. In fact, maybe we'll invest in new opportunities. Critical thinker is that I could give Mark new responsibilities at work and give him that needed raise, right? And if Mark hears that, he's going to have confidence to take those actions in those areas that critical thinking is important, right? That is, an assessment, sometimes we speak things that may be obvious to us, but it's not obvious to the other person. So if I think I'm a good thinker, but somebody says, wow, you're a great thinker, critical thinker, then I might step into that role even more. The patient is in shock, right? So that might have medical people administer epinephrine, diphenhydramine, solumedrol, right? So you can hear how An assessment can then produce these actions. Right? And if I have an assessment that Ian's an expert climber, maybe I don't have to yell at him to get off the roof, right? Maybe he's okay up there. Right? Okay, here's the one thing that you've really got to be super careful, and it's never to give a drive-by assessment. You know, these are the ones that kind of hurt, or we feel like we're supposed to duck our head, or that we're supposed to, argue back, right? And so they fail to provide a good observational basis, or they're just too generalized, right? They are useless, they're damaging, and they sting. Right? So this is an area to be super careful, because if we give a drive-by assessment, we could really damage somebody else in our organization, and we could also lose credibility ourselves. Right? Therefore, trust could be at risk. So, Mark, you're an idiot, right? So maybe you're holding that assessment of me, but it's so generalized, I don't know what to do about that, right? I don't know what to do about that. Mark, you're the best at project management. I go, wow, I didn't know that, but I don't know what I'm really good at, so I don't know how to leverage it even more. Okay? Mark, you really let us down on that project. Okay, sorry, boss, right? But I don't know what to do because I don't know where I fell short, right? So to give a powerful assessment, we got to get much more specific, okay? So we speak them only into a shared commitment, right? So if somebody at work says, well, Mark, you're a crummy father, well, okay, but that's really not relevant here in the workplace, okay? They have to be specific, right? You can't say, Mark, you're bad at project management, because there's a ton of components that come into successful project management. So we have to really think through and be a critical observer of Mark, and then decide, where is he breaking down, okay? And then we have to be able to ground it. Well, here's what I saw. Here's what I observed, right? Mark, you're impatient with our guests. And here's where I've seen you do that, right? And here's how it's shown up for me. And here's the reaction I saw on the guests that you produced, right? Much more useful. Now, here's the most frightening thing of all regarding assessments, is that we're assessment machines. We can't turn this off, right? There is no on-off switch. All we can do is realize we're having an assessment and hold it as such, and create our own self-awareness, right? So everything we say and do and not say and do produces an assessment. So it's kind of scary. As leaders, people are constantly assessing us. We walk through the front door and people are going, hey, what kind of mood is Mark in today? And it's going to be safe to work and have that really hard conversation with them. Like, no, I can't do that, right? So it could stifle action, right? Or, wow, Mark comes in open every day and he seems open today, so I'm ready to go down the hall and have that really hard conversation with Mark, okay? So this sounds scary, but it's actually really useful if we just pay attention and just hold this in the background, that we're constantly being assessed. And equally important is that we're constantly assessing everybody else. And assessments are neither true nor false, right? They're just assessments, okay? Now, here's another important part. Assessments are a gift, right? To hear somebody say that I'm really good at something or I'm really challenged at something, that's a gift to hear, because then I know it's something that I can do to improve myself, to improve my career, to be a better father, or to be a better worker, and so forth. Packaging matters, okay? So how we give assessments really matters, okay? It is our obligation to give assessments in a way that they can be heard, right? So if we're giving an assessment and we see somebody collapsing in front of us, we can say, oh, that's their fault. They don't have enough self-esteem, we might think, right? We pile another assessment on it in our head. Or we can realize, wow, as a leader, did I not have enough care and concern about how I spoke this assessment to Mark, right? And now Mark can't hear the assessment, and now we can't go forward. All right, we're going to switch to number 3, declaration. We don't use this word very often anymore, but we certainly did back in 1776, right? And they invoke a future into existence. So the idea of a democracy And the notion, still infant at the time, that all men are created equal, that was a brand new idea, at least certainly in the history of Western Europe, okay? So by invoking a future, if we speak a declaration well, we create a future, right? We create a future. We also can create new possibilities, right? If I can speak the right declaration about my company, our vision, and so forth, suddenly new operations possibilities could be available to us. And then they also can envision something that others don't see or perceive, or maybe they kind of perceive it, but they can't articulate it. And they're waiting for the leader to pull it all together into a declaration, right? So in our history, we hold a couple of really strong ones, all these examples, right? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and that they're endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights. And that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so, you know, we're still working this one, right? As a country, we're still working this one. But it's easy to get behind this, right? It's really powerful language, right? So sometimes we're not the poets of people in the past. So I'm not saying you have to be poetic with your declarations, but this is a really powerful one. We created a whole country and created a whole revolution about how people can view each other in the role of government. Here's another example. You know, I won't try to do Kennedy's Boston accent, but he says, we choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills, because that challenge is one that we are willing to accept. Really powerful because he ties into us, why? Why is this declaration of value? Why does it matter, right? So let's get more practical, right? A declaration could be something as simple as we will expand into Grand County in 2021, right? I'm kind of thinking sort of maybe Grand County could be an opportunity for us, right? That's so fuzzy and nobody can get behind it. But if we say we will expand, then all of a sudden people could get energized behind that and start taking relevant actions. Sometimes we make declarations for the self, right? I am a patient leader. And I speak this as a declaration for myself. And we do this before we are that patient leader. We don't say, I'm kind of thinking of working on being more patient this year. Really, we should just say, I am a patient leader. It'll scare the shit out of us. And then we'll start to get organized like, wow, what do I need to do to be seen as a patient leader every single day? I told you early in my career I was a financial analyst. And then as I got moved into roles of management, I was told I was an impatient leader, which was really weird for me because at home I was tremendously patient. But in the workplace, I had to admit that, no, I wasn't, right? No, I wasn't. And so it was a place for me to work. So I made a declaration, I am a patient leader, and then I did the work, okay? To say something like this to a person, you are a key leader in an organization, imagine what that does for them. Like, wow, now I'm really energized and empowered to help lead us next year, right? To really pursue our objectives, okay? They're also really effective if we can tie assessments back to them. We will expand into Grand County in 2021. There's no organization providing those services that we do. The rent's affordable and our operations are running well. Now, if I'm an employee and I hear all this, I go, wow, okay, it's not maybe so scary. And that, you know, Mark has really thought through why we could pull this off, okay? You're a key leader organization. I see that you are engaging in your approach and that others are seeking out your opinion. Wow, okay. That's really empowering to somebody. And when we speak these things, I may have to go, I'm pretty engaging, but maybe I could be more engaging, right? So sometimes we speak declarations a little bit ahead of where people might be to help them fill that gap, help them be energized towards that, right? Wow, okay, now number 4, request. This one seems pretty straightforward, right? Request her to make a specific ask of somebody or a group. We say, hey, maybe that's easy, but sometimes we get kind of fuzzy with our requests. Mark, would it be okay if you took over this project, right? As opposed to, Mark, take over this project, right? They initiate actions in a person or a group of people. Okay, so examples, right? Get me a glass of water, right? Now, would you kind of sort of maybe think about getting me some water, right? Complete that report by noon on Friday. Well, I know what to do now. I got to organize to get it done by noon on Friday. Okay, build that block wall on the west side of the property today, right? So if you notice, strong ones also have a time component, right? So I know by when. Otherwise, I might go, well, it's slipping down low on my priority list, right? And all that said, saying please could have a really positive effect on likelihood somebody's going to do the request. So there is a special kind of request, and that's an insist, right? So when we make a request, we're asking the other person to agree to be engaged in it. And we might be inviting them to ask us questions to really be sure about what's required or what help they might need and so forth. But with an insist, we're really not asking for any significant conversation about it. Just might be clarifying some things, but there's really not an opening here for negotiation, right? A request might produce that. Mark, can you complete that report by Friday? I might have to say, I can do that if I can then take care of that other thing on Monday. And then somebody could go, yeah, that's a good negotiation. But in assist, we're not asking for negotiation, right? We might say, you always wear a hard hat on the job site. We're not negotiating this. Never give out a guest room number. Never, ever, ever, right? Go bust the outdoor tables. Sometimes you don't have the chance to really form a request like, wow, I see somebody that needs immediate need, right? And my favorite, set phasers to stun. So we should use insist, but use them with a lot of care, concern, and intention, right? If we overuse and insist, we're going to produce some morale issues at the other side. So there's a really strong time component. If there's a really powerful need to take a corrective action, then definitely use an insist. Otherwise, use a request such that you can invite a good dialogue about understanding about it. So a request is when I make a request of you, right? Now, an offer is turning it around, where somebody says, let me take care of something. So in an offer, I'm expressing an intention or willingness to take action. I'm not being asked, I'm saying so. I will offer to complete that report by Friday. Okay? So it's simply whose role is it, right? With a request, it's the person with greater authority tends to be the one making a request, but not always, right? An offer is simply saying, hey, let me take the action. And so as leaders, those of us in leadership roles, we certainly have to make a lot of requests of the organization and people in it. But we can also make really clear offers. Let me coach you on such and such. Let me support your training and development over here. Or like I said, your workload is bigger than I thought. Let me take back writing that report so that you can get those other tasks done by Friday. Okay. So it's initiating the action in the self. And sometimes we do this, but we don't declare it, right? We don't declare the offer. We'll simply start doing things. And it's really useful to declare out loud so we don't have duplicate activity or we don't misuse resources. And it's also empowering to others to know, hey, Mark is stepping in on this project too. He's made a really clear offer. I'm so glad he's taken over that part of the project. And therefore, my stress level goes down. So we have to be sure that we don't just think our offers, but that we actually speak them out loud, right? So what are some examples? Let me get you a glass of water, right? I can help. Let me take over that report and complete it by noon on Friday. Right? Let me build the wall today, right? so that you can do X and XYZ. We will sponsor the Lunch and Learn event. Right? There's an offer that Jack likes to hear. So requests and offers. Requests, when you make a request, always make sure that you have an accept, right? So we might be standing at somebody's office door. I mean, imagine the old days when we stood at office doors, right? And we said, hey, Mark, would you complete that report on it by Friday? And then I leave. And Mark's thinking, oh man, I don't know how to get that done and have this other commitment done for him also, right? So we have to slow down and make sure that people understand what the request is and do they accept the request. Okay. And if you make an offer to somebody, let me write that report for you. You better be dang sure that you can and will complete. Because if you don't, you'll lose credibility and actually it'll produce a trust breakdown. Always make sure that you have a time component. That is, by when. You notice I keep doing that and I'm harping on it a bit because sometimes I see organizations that are really sloppy around this. So if I say, I'll complete that report, I'll have that financial statement to you, but we don't put a time commitment on it, it's not a commitment. It's not any kind of strong enough that people go, oh, I'm behind Mark on this. So I have to say, I promise, I will get that financial statement to you and on your desk by Monday morning at 10 a.m. Like, and we say those things as an offer, and we might be scared, like, ooh, I just put myself out there. But we build trust because the other person knows, okay, by 10 a.m., I'll see that. Fulfilling on our commitments builds trust and credibility, right? So I look at trust in a business in a practical sense, not a moral sense. So certainly we have our own moral notions about how we trust each other, right? So Mark does not drive through town with an Uzi and shooting at everybody. Like, that's going to build trust if I don't do that. But the way I really can business build trust is to fulfill on my commitments, to fulfill on my offers. People will see me as credible. Now back to complaint. I talked about this at the beginning, right? We hear a lot of complaint. It's too hot. I don't have enough time. I need to get somebody hired, right? So when someone when someone complains, turn it into either a request or an offer. So what is your request? Well, I need somebody else's help for me to finish that report. Well, great. Who did you have in mind? You see, so now we're moving into a role of action. So again, we get a lot of complaint. I told you at the beginning, our society is good at it. And so we have to start turning that. So what is your request? Yeah, I hear that you're working long hours. I get it. What's your request, right? So we don't blow past the complaint. If somebody's in pain, you acknowledge the pain and then say, what's your request? Do you have an idea, right? How would you solve it, right? So these are ways in which we can generate it back into the request and offer domain, okay? So again, complaints are real to people. We want to tend to them. We want to acknowledge, we want to express empathy if it's relevant, and then turn it into either a request or an offer. So here's where we are so far, right? Assertions, true and verifiable. Assessments are opinions. Declarations invoke a new future. A request initiates action in others, and we talked about an insist a bit. And then an offer initiates action in myself, into the self, okay? So I told you there was a special one, the promise, right? And this is an exceedingly powerful speech act, right? Remember I used that term? And what we do is it becomes a declaration that is a mutual commitment to ensure an outcome, right? So if I make a request of you, then you're going to go off and do that, right? But we're not necessarily in a promise with each other, okay? But if we do all the work such that at the end of the conversation, we feel like now we're in a mutual commitment together on this, then we're in a promise. So the way we do this is we have to use the other speech acts, okay? So we make a declaration, we work through what all the assertions and assessments are, what requests and offers we need to do and coordinate together, and then we can say, now can you promise to do this, right? So we don't lead with, hey, can you promise to get me that report by Friday? Because I'm gonna say, I guess so, boss, right? But rather, we work through what all the needs are and all the other speech acts. If we get those all knitted together, that's what a promise looks like. So sometimes that's why a promise can seem so fleeting to us, because it does take a lot more work, and it does take a lot of attention to different aspects of these other 5 speech acts, right? So we need to build promises for things that are complex or really, really important, right? So a simple action of go build that wall is very different than we're going to complete this home for Jack by December 31st, right? And here are the plans and specs, right? A lot of complexity to that, okay? Creating, this all takes time, I told you that, right? So we're gonna have to create, we're also gonna have to negotiate some things. We may have to give and take, right? And then we have to pay attention to every one of the other 5 speech acts. And then we have a promise, right? So I promised you, you could remember 7 things. If you can remember 5 of them, work them all together, then you have a promise, right? Such that we ensure a mutual commitment to success. So if we don't, in a promise, if the promise breaks down, we're both mutually contributors to it. You know, what did I not call out? How did I not give you the resources needed? And then for the other person might be, yeah, I was late on getting that done, and that affected this and that affected that, right? So when we're in a mutual commitment to success, people are much more motivated than when they're just bossed around. Whew, now what, okay? So I'm gonna talk about some specific things that you could do as takeaways right now. Hopefully you're already getting some ideas and jotting some things down. But I'll give you some hints here. First thing we have to do is we have to start listening for them, right? So when a conversation stalls, it's probably because it's descriptive language and not language for action. So as a leader, if we feel it stall and we're not hearing speech acts, then we should probably generate one, right? We could make a request to somebody. We could initiate an offer, right? We could make an assessment. The assessment might even be, hey, our conversation just stalled. Did anybody else see that? And here's why I see that, okay? Mood often accompanies this, right? We're moody creatures. I don't mean that as a bad thing, but inside of us and at the most foundational aspects of our brain, we generate moods. Some moods are really useful and some are not, right? I don't moralize around moods. We have them. And in business, we want to pay attention to them and do our best to align them. We always have to tend to the mood first, the speech act second, right? So if Mark has a bad mood about the project, we have to unravel that bad mood before we can start making requests of him, right? Or he may agree, but he's going to go home, kick the dog, and come in tomorrow and be begrudgingly about how he does his work. Okay? The mood gets in the way first, right? So our mood brain operates faster than our intellectual one, right? And so we have to acknowledge this, and that we have to tend to the mood so it's not in the way of then working through the other speech acts. Here's the next one that's sometimes hard for us, is to ask for an assessment because we're afraid of what somebody might tell us, right? Mark, you're not really patient, right? Like, oh, wow, I thought I was, okay? So as leaders, it's our role to ask for them, right? And we have to be specific. We can't just simply say, Rita, hey, give me an assessment about how the conversation went. We have to be a bit more specific, right? Did I give enough space for other people to contribute, right? That might be something I would work on if I was trying to be seen as a more patient leader, okay? So we have to be pretty specific about it. when we hear an assessment, we have to let it land. I'm not saying we take it in. I'm not saying we have to agree with it. Assessments are neither true nor false, right? That is, they don't define who we are. They're simply assessments about how our actions, our language, and so forth are helping support coordinated action or not. That's all they are, right? Assessments are just assessments. Okay? If the assessment aligns, then change your behavior, right? If you're given an assessment, you don't change your behavior, you're not going to hear assessments anymore. And if you're going to change your behavior, you have to make a self-declaration that I am committed to being seen as a patient leader in 100 days. I may say that and I may scare myself going, I don't know how I'm going to transition that much in 100 days. But boy, starting tomorrow, I'm committed to doing that, right? But if I don't have a time commitment, yeah, I'll get around to being patient one of these days. I'm not really behind it, okay? And then be sure to follow up with the person who gave you an assessment, right? Figure out what's a good time frame and go back and say, hey, 2 months ago, you told me that I was being impatient. How am I doing with this, right? Use your assessments to lead into other speech acts, right? I saw that you're working late on a project and you may have underestimated the amount of time it would take, okay? What part of the project could I take on to help it be completed? Okay. That is, I have an assertion that I saw you working late. I have an assessment that you underestimated the amount of time. And then I led that into an offer. Where can I help? Okay. Here's another example. You were unkind with that guest in how you managed their complaint. This is unacceptable, and our reputation is based on respect and service. Please stay late and work with Latasha on how to work with guest complaints, right? So in this case, I'm using assessment first, then I'm making a declaration. That was just unacceptable, right? I don't have to be mean about it, but if I'm declaring something like, hey, that was unacceptable, better be really clear to somebody. Leaders create their own declarations, right? If you want to improve your leadership, you make a personal declaration up front for yourself, okay? You don't just go, well, I heard that I'm a bit impatient and leave it at that. We say, I want to be seen as a patient leader. So therefore, I declare I am a patient leader. And within 60 days, I will hear such and such to prove that I'm a patient leader. Okay. But you got to be tied into this. So if you don't have a clear for sake of what to your declaration, then don't make that declaration, right? Like the why behind it. For the sake of what am I making this declaration? Work fewer declarations, both for yourself and your team, right? Don't have a lot of them. That'll be far more effective. 1 to 2 powerful declarations will move everybody further than if you have a lot of them, because it divides our attention. So you could do some chunking around it, like I'm going to have this declaration for the first quarter of the year, and then I'm going to look to have another declaration for the next quarter and so forth. But don't make it too far out there, too broad or anything like that where people know how to get behind it. So, we hear this all the time as we come up to the new year. I'll lose 10 pounds this year, I promise myself, right? But it's weak because there's not a clear for sake of what. So instead, we orient around, I will increase my health and well-being this year so I can enjoy our environs. And I'll know I'm successful when I can hike 12 miles with ease, right? I bet if you did all that, you'd lose that 10 pounds. And the one on the right is something I can get behind. Wow, hiking. That's great. Getting up to see that overlook, right? That would be great. And then therefore, I'll lose those 10 pounds. Okay? I'll become better at project management. Well, like I said, project management's a pretty complex thing. So I'll master project management. So not just better, I'll master it. I'll roll in a project management course by January 1st, and projects will stay on track. And my boss will tell me, hey, you're a pretty good project manager now by July 1st, right? So if we have some dates by it, then we really feel compelled to start taking action now. Okay? So this guy's been in the news a lot, Dr. Anthony Fauci, right? He's the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. And here's something he said not too long ago. I've devoted my entire professional life to fighting infectious diseases. This is an outbreak of historic proportions, the likes of which we have not seen in 102 years. There's no chance that I'm going to give up on this and walk away from it no matter what happens, right? So his assertion that he's devoted his entire professional life, and he has, you could look at his background and say he has. He's made an assessment about the outbreak, and by damn if he isn't behind this, right? There's no chance I'm going to give up on this, right? That's a personal declaration that's very, very powerful. And he spoke it out loud because he's in a leadership role, and people are like, wow, okay, so he's really gonna help us out here. So if I work in the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, and I hear my boss say this, I go, gosh, he's behind all of us on this, right? I can get behind him. Therefore, it's language for action, right? So here are the speech acts again, right? It's a weird term, but there's 5 of them plus the special one, we promise. Okay. People who make and keep their commitments are seen as trustworthy. Period, stop, right? Now, we can also have moral trust with each other, right? But I'm talking about practical trust where people can coordinate well together. So, we have responsibilities to create a shared reality. We do that through assessments and assertions, bring a meaningful future into existence, a declaration, and generate effective action, requests, and offers. And as leaders, we do this almost entirely through language. When we don't coordinate effectively, so I have been in a hotel that has that carpet on the stairs, and it is nearly impossible to walk down. Yeah, sure, boss, I got that pylon put up. Yeah, I got that piping installed for you. And then, yeah, I think we're ADA compliant, right? This one here is probably the School of Architecture, right? Who knows what that's about? Yeah, I got those stairs set so people could reach that ATM. Got that railing so the cars are safe now, but bam, the bicyclists are gonna have a hard time. And hey, boss, nobody will see our building from the sky, right? And by the way, that lower right-hand corner picture is a U.S. naval building. So it's just a horrible accident, right? But not thinking through what the outcomes are. Okay. So I leave you with this, right? Conversations take time and everything else takes longer. So as we're in conversation, pay attention to all these different speech acts, bind them all together in a useful way, and you'll coordinate more effectively. You'll get home earlier and be able to pet your dog and walk your dog more and so forth, right? So I'm wishing you a more powerful rest of your life now because you've learned language of power, right? If you'd like this handout, drop me an email. The thing is, you got to be able to spell that train wreck of a last name, Mark Haeussler, and then note that Alpine Leadership is a .co, not a .com. And I'll leave that there for you.
Thank you, Mark. It's good information. And also, we did record this, so if anybody wants a copy, we will be posting it also to the website, obviously with Mark's permission. But I want to ask real quick, how much does body language play into it? I know that's a whole different topic probably, but I would think body language also with all the different approaches that you talked about play in.
Yeah, really good question. And I so wanted to go there, and it was a 15-minute presentation, so I just left it out. But
okay,
absolutely,
thanks for coming. I'm kidding.
But there's 3 components to leadership in my world, and that's how do we utilize language effectively. So we focus there. What's the presence we bring, right? So if my body language is just all closed off, but I'm saying I want to hear your offer, that certainly blocks that language. It interferes with it. And then the last thing is really is how do we model? How do we create enough modeling around a request such that people can really understand it well enough? And so 3 things, certainly our presence, our language, and how do we map or model the future for people. And so 2 of those pieces were not addressed well today, just for time. Yeah.
And again, if anybody wants to reach out to Mark, remember obviously the Chamber of Commerce, and we can put you in contact with him. So check the chat real quick, see if there's any other. I hope this applies to my teenagers. Body language relates to mood. Obviously, some thank yous, Mark. So yeah, thank you, Mark, for presenting today. And I'm sure we'll be following up. Appreciate you very much. And again, Mark Haeussler with Alpine Leadership. Everybody, have a great day. And wow, we're gonna end class just a couple minutes early. So we'll grab some extra dessert now. Thank you again, Mark.
Yeah, and to answer that question, yes, this works really well on children and teenagers. So go for it.
And chamber directors.
Have a great day.
Thanks. Take care.